Mark, thank you very much. Now to a KWWL follow-up report tonight as we continue to dig deeper into the recent termination, the firing of a former Cedar Rapids Police Sergeant, Lucas Jones. Now remember last week we heard directly from Jones in a two-part story about the 6 violations that the department says he made, which led to his termination. Now tonight, KWWL's Ashley Neighbor brings us part 3 and a follow-up to this story after sitting down with Jones and his attorney for more information.
All 6 violations appear to stem from a 2016 traffic stop where Jones cut a suspended driver a break. We told you about that last week. Today, we're taking a closer look at other factors Jones and his attorney believe played a role in his firing. In December 2019, former CRPD Sergeant Lucas Jones tells me he was approached by a female officer who says she was made uncomfortable by one of her male peers.
After I'd been promoted for a year, I had a female officer approach me about a male officer who currently works at CRPD who is conducting some unethical behavior regarding sexual harassment and discrimination.
The male officer allegedly spoke openly about using dating apps, finding some of the women, going to their homes, and looking for a reason to pull them over.
She told me that on the nights that they would ride together, he would graphically describe his genitalia to her and that it made her very uncomfortable and that she told him that she wanted him to quit talking about it.
Jones tells me he took the information and began following up on it, compiling everything he observed and investigated into this memo, which was redacted and shared with us.
She also pointed out to me that, hey, he spends a lot of his nights at the hospitals making nurses very uncomfortable with his advances. So there was one night in particular, after roll call, I assigned this officer to be a Northeast unit because there are no hospitals within the Northeast district of where we patrol.
One night, Jones says he observed the officer at one of the hospitals, spending more than an hour there, despite his assignment in another area. The memo also details an alleged sexual relationship between the officer with a suspect in a previous case, and advances the officer made to another's wife during a social gathering. The memo, which also cited other female officers, ends saying, quote, "Officer Blank told me she is genuinely concerned for the welfare of females that Officer Blank encounters." Jones tells me he emailed the memo to an internal affairs lieutenant in early January and gave him a physical paper copy. I requested all emails exchanged between the two for the first 3 weeks in January in a Freedom of Information request, but CRPD says there were no emails. I asked the department to confirm a physical memo was received or if an investigation was conducted. They told me, quote, "Any memos that were presented to professional standards would be a confidential personnel record under Iowa code." Jones also says after hearing complaints from fellow officers, the following month he reported one of the department's captains to the deputy chief for not wearing a bulletproof vest as required by department policy.
I'd seen it myself, noticing that Captain Furnish is out in public in a uniform with no vest on and only carrying a handgun, not carrying handcuffs, not carrying his less lethal requirement. So if he were to have an interaction in the public, he has no less lethal item on his belt, he only has a handgun.
Jones says the next day he was given his notice for administrative investigation.
It kind of started to dawn on me that, hey, you know, you're essentially whistle blew against these captains, and one of the captain's friends, that officer, you might want to, you know, have a heads up and kind of realize what's coming.
Jones's attorney also says he wasn't able to get documents of the administrative investigation to help Jones prepare for his pre-disciplinary meeting before he was terminated.
They were accusing Lucas of lying. Their notice included some information, but certainly information that they relied on in terminating him, they did not provide to him in advance of that time. So he had no opportunity to go in there and provide a response. He can't respond to something that he doesn't have.
Jones was fired in mid-June as a petition with thousands of signatures was circulating, demanding his termination. It cited one of Jones's 2 officer-involved shootings where Jeremy Mitchell was shot and paralyzed. Jones was cleared of any wrongdoing. CRPD later announced Jones's termination in a press release.
He's doing all that because it's political pressure. Instead of doing the right thing, which would be to stand there and say, we've investigated Lucas Jones, the DCI has investigated Lucas Jones, a grand jury has investigated Lucas Jones, and he's done nothing wrong.
Again, CRPD says these allegations are personnel matter and private under Iowa code. Jones is appealing his termination. Reporting in Cedar Rapids, Ashley Neighbor, News 7 KWWL.
Ashley, thanks for the update. Very interesting developments there in that ongoing case. If you missed the first 2 parts of Ashley's exclusive interview with the former officer, Lucas Jones, and his attorney, please click on the story right now. It's still available for you in their entirety on KWWL.com.